And it happened on the day after. Vayihi mimacharas. Yisro arrives with his daughter Tzipora, i.e. Moshe's wife, and his grandchildren, Moshe's children, and he reunites the family with Moshe in the camp of Klal Yisrael. And the Torah says, Vayihi mimacharas. Next day, Vayeshev Moshe lishpotes ha'am. Moshe goes to work being chief judge for the Jewish people, adjudicating disputes and litigation, and being the resource for providing the wisdom of Ritzon Hashem, the will of Hashem, in the lives, the day-to-day lives of the Jewish people. They come and they ask him questions. What do they do? How do they resolve disputes, etc.? The question that the Mefarshim wonder about is, Vayihi mimacharas, and it happened on the next day. The next day following what? What exactly is the Torah pointing out here? And so there are two basic approaches in the Mefarshim. Vayihi mimacharas, the following day, Vayeshev Moshe lishpotes ha'am. Moshe sat to judge the people. Many Mefarshim say that this refers to the day after Yisro arrived. And the Torah tells us that when Yisro arrived, it was a great celebration. Vayikach Yisro Chosei Moshe Olo Zvachem Le'Elohim. Yisro made a great celebration. There was a great feast. Vayavo Aaron v'chol ziknei Yisrael lechol lechem im Chosei Moshe lefnei Elohim. And Aaron and all Bnei Yisrael came to break bread with Moshe before God. That is to say, there was a Yom HaSeudah. This was a great, wonderful day. The Yisro and the family came back. There was a karban. There was a feast. There was a beautiful moment. And the Torah tells us that the very next day, Moshe went right back to work. Or maybe Moshe went straight to work. And this, in the words of Rabbi Sorotzkin, however, many Mefarshim, Rishonim, Achronim all come to the following point, that this shows us the dedication of Moshe to Klal Yisrael. He didn't say, well, I'm going to take off a few days and just rest and relax. And indeed, in the protocol of royalty, certain days of old, says Rabbi Sorotzkin, Chosno ishto vanav bo mimerchakim el hamelech. The family, the royal family has arrived. V'hamelech mimacharas yoshev kvar v'danis amo. And the king, instead of spending all this time with the family, is back at work judging the people. Extraordinary commitment. Umi b'chol malchei mizrach u'marav lo haya machriz chag b'chol medinos memshalto. And who amongst all the royalty, all the monarchs, all the kings in the east and in the west, throughout the world, who would not have declared a great holiday and a day of feasting and a time of feasting for at least a week? That would be standard protocol. Says Rabbi Sorotzkin, this is exactly what the Torah is telling us, the godless of Moshe Rabbeinu. Yes, it was beautiful that the family arrived. It was a great day, a great day of feasting, honoring Hashem even in this feast. It was beautiful. But he had commitments to Klal Yisrael. And therefore, he broke with the tradition of normal monarchs, of normal royalty. He said, my responsibility is to the Klal, and that's where I am going. Now that's one way to suggest a read of this pasuk. But perhaps the Torah is telling us maybe a little critique of Moshe Rabbeinu. Maybe the Torah is telling us that Moshe Rabbeinu just perhaps didn't strike a good family-work balance. And perhaps Moshe Rabbeinu should have spent more time with the family. And the reason that I say that maybe this is a little bit more of a critique of Moshe Rabbeinu is because what comes right next in the Parsha. Vayar Yisro Chosein Moshe, and Yisro, the father-in-law of Moshe, saw what was going on and how Moshe was judging the people day and night, and how he was overworked and the people were overburdened. And Yisro provides a new paradigm, a new prototype for how to conduct the affairs of state. And Moshe Rabbeinu accepts it. And that becomes the basis for our judicial system for how to run Batei Din. So it could very well be that this statement, Vayihi mimacharas, the very next day, Moshe went straight to work. Perhaps, just perhaps, the Torah is saying that a person has to have balance, even when it comes to commitment to the klal, and maybe specifically, because we all have wonderful commitments to ourselves, to our jobs, to our community, to Klal Yisrael as a whole, and a person's responsibility to their family, to family life, to living a healthy and balanced, that can get compromised sometimes, even with the best of intentions and the most noble of causes. And so perhaps, just perhaps, the Torah is sharing with us a little bit of a cautionary tale. And Yisro comes to correct that imbalance. And indeed, Moshe Rabbeinu accepts Yisro's advice. And a more balanced system, where it doesn't all fall on Moshe Rabbeinu's shoulders, is established. And that's one way of understanding the pasuk. Vayihi mimacharas, and it happened on the very next day. But there's another approach. And others suggest, based on Chazal, that this is not the day after the return of Yisro and the family. Vayihi mimacharas means the day after Yom Kippur. It was the day after Moshe Rabbeinu came down from the mountain. Vayihi mimacharas, and in this august moment, in this moment of extraordinary spirituality, when Moshe Rabbeinu descends from the mountain, he goes to work. And he begins judging Klal Yisrael. And he is employing the system of justice that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has set before us. So what's the Torah telling us? Okay, so it was after Yom Kippur. Well, what's the point of that? I saw in the name of Rabbi Soloveitchik that there is a powerful message that the Torah is sending here. And that is that if this is the first time that Moshe Rabbeinu, right after the Torah is given, that Moshe Rabbeinu sits down to employ the system of justice, Batei Din, litigants coming to have complaints against one another, and Moshe Rabbeinu resolving it according to Ritzon Hashem, to the halacha, according to the will of Hashem. Why on this day? What is the message that it happened right on this day after Yom Kippur? Says Rav Soloveitchik, imagine the scene, or imagine the mood of the people after Yom Kippur, the day that that Moshe comes down from the mountain with the luchos in hand. The people are going to be feeling somewhat forgiving, because let us recall that this is also the day that Hashem forgave Klal Yisrael. That day of Yom Kippur was the day that Hashem forgave Klal Yisrael for Chet HaEgel, for the sin of the golden calf. And so the people are feeling in a forgiving mood, in an expansive mood. They're feeling a sense of relief, just as Hashem had forgiven them. You know that feeling that we all have after Yom Kippur, that sense of relief, sense of expansiveness, sense of goodwill. There's a good feeling in the air. And this is the context in which Moshe begins to judge the Jewish people. Rabbi Soloveitchik suggests that this is the mood in which people came into litigation, into the courtroom, into the Beis Din. And with that frame of mind, people are more likely to compromise, to figure out how to make this work. You have your view of what went wrong. I have my view of what may or may not have gone wrong. Maybe we can figure this out. Pshara, compromise. Indeed, the Shulchan Aruch rules in the code of Jewish law that when it comes to litigation, to Jewish litigation in Beis Din, the preferred methodology is pshara, compromise, not going to the strict letter of the law and seeing who deserves what. The preferred methodology within the law is that the litigants should find some type of compromise. Pshara. So this is the prototype, the basis for the entire justice system within Judaism, that we should come to have pshara, compromise with one another. And that is not just a prototype for how we conduct litigation, but how we conduct our interpersonal relationships. Pshara, compromise, being expansive, forgiving, figuring out how we can make this work when we're coming at it from different directions. Vayihi mimacharas. So on that next day, whether it's the day after Yom Kippur, emphasizing the notion of compromise in human relations, or whether it's the day after the family came back, emphasizing the idea that we have to compromise in a healthy way to find a balance between work and family. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is telling us that this is a value that we must instill, and it is the predicate for what comes next, Matan Torah. And when it comes to Matan Torah, accepting the Torah, in the parsha we have the Aseres HaDibros. When it comes to our commitments to Hashem, our commitments to Hashem should have no compromise, to the best of our capability. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu give us the wisdom to know when we should go full throttle, 150%, and also to understand the importance and need in our personal, professional, in interpersonal life to compromise. Good Shabbos.